Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager, and I welcome you to the show. I was driving behind a car today which had a Bernie 2020 bumper sticker. It was a Prius. Well, I only mention it. I know you say shocking. That's appropriate. There are undoubtedly conservatives who also drive Priuses. But anyway, it was a Prius, which is secondary in importance. The reason I mention it is there was another bumper sticker. I had never seen this one before. Obviously, it's sold, or the man wouldn't have it. I don't believe he makes his own bumper stickers. But even if he did, it was revealing. So how many of you have heard of the phrase, God is my co-pilot? Have you ever heard that?
Of course.
Right. Have you ever heard that? Okay, it's great. I'm glad it's well known. What do you think his bumper sticker said?
Science.
Science is my co-pilot? It's a very intelligent guess. Is my co-pilot is correct? Instead of God, what do you think the word was? Hillary. That's hilarious. Dog.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, a lot of people,
Because God backwards is dog. Dog is my co-pilot. Now, in the realm of surprise, on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being shocking and 1 being, of course, it was a 1. Bernie 2020, dog is my co-pilot. God, I didn't see if it was a man or a woman. Not that it would matter, actually. That could truly be either. And I would have loved, as I always say, to interview this person. What was the reason for your putting up the sticker, dog is my co-pilot? So my thinking of these are things, as you know, I think about a lot. There has to be an element of mockery of God. There's no other possibility, correct? Right. And mockery of those of us who do believe in God. That's key. Now, it's interesting. There's no doubt in my mind that that person thinks he or she is morally and intellectually superior to those who believe in God. It's not doubtable because of the mockery element. You mock those you think are beneath you in intellect and in morality. So I just thought I would comment on that. And why do those people want bigger and bigger and bigger government? I mean, you have to connect the two positions, Bernie 2020 and dog is my co-pilot. Otherwise, it's pointless. They're not coincidental. Would everybody agree, left or right? Everybody would agree. It is not a coincidence that a Bernie 2020 supporter would mock God and mock those who would say God is my co-pilot. So why do people who mock religion, mock God, why do they want ever-expanding power to lie in the hands of government, of the state? That's an interesting and important question. Whatever answer you come up with, let us at least acknowledge this, that in America, at least, freedom is overwhelmingly a value among conservatives and among the religious. Okay? Can we at least acknowledge that? And that the more anti-religious you get, generally speaking, the bigger the government you want. It's a very important correlation. I have spent my life, as I say so often, explaining the consequences of the death of religion, the death of God, as Nietzsche put it. I very rarely argue for God's existence. Of course, I believe in God's existence, but I don't make that argument often. I overwhelmingly make the argument of God's significance, which to me is more important to argue. As America gets more secular, it gets less free. The Bernie 2020 dog is my co-pilot driver is a perfect example. The whole thing, it's like a synopsis of the whole thing. Secular conservatives don't understand this. They're some of the greatest people I know, but they have a blind spot with regard to religion. They think they have been as influenced by college, by the secular brainwash of college, as leftists have. But thank God, or thank whoever you want to isolate as a conservative icon, they have not abandoned their love of the Constitution, love of this country, love of liberty. But the dog is my co-pilot crowd does want bigger and bigger government. Talking about which, by the way, the phone number is 1-8-Prager 776. They're going to vote on, what is it now, $2 trillion? What is it?
Yes,
$2 trillion, plus the other $1 trillion and $1 trillion before that.
And $1 trillion before that.
And $1 trillion before that. A trillion. What's a trillion? It's 1,000 billion. That's what it should have. Too bad there's a word trillion. It should have been 1,000 billion. The 1,000 billion, the $2,000 billion bill. I cannot foresee an America that rebounds from this. It might be able to rebound economically, I don't know. The debt is so overwhelming, the inflation will be so profound. But my biggest worry is the addiction to entitlements. I have often said to you that I believe, and I mean this literally, I think it is more difficult to get off heroin than to get off entitlements. That is a very, very difficult thing to work out. A dog is my co-pilot is for dog rescue. That I didn't either, but okay, I just wanted to do that. Yes. God as your co-pilot puts God second. It's an interesting question. So, what does it mean, God as your pilot? It's a phrase. It's like God and I are critical to this cockpit, to this life. God is my...
It means God is beside me.
Of course it means God is beside me, exactly. And what does it mean God is my pilot? If it means my moral director, yes. But if it means the one that is piloting my plane, I don't believe that. My understanding of God is not that he is piloting my plane. I get directives on how to live a life, but I can mess up my life. People who mess up their lives are their pilots. There's no way around that. Anyway, this bill that they will undoubtedly pass, or Nancy Pelosi would not have put it up to a vote, is a Wreck America and Wreck Americans bill, the likes of which I do not recall, since I guess Lyndon Johnson. We'll be back. I'm Dennis Prager. The Dennis Prager Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I've just heard so much about this, and nobody seems to be taking it seriously.
This is the exact reason that in normal science, this is not normal science by any stretch of the imagination, we do benefit risk analysis. And obviously that is different for each person. But here we're not doing that. We're just saying everybody needs to do this. And we're completely neglecting natural immunity, which is extremely important. We've recognized it for decades and decades before now. Now they won't even want to talk about it or acknowledge it at all.
What do you reckon is behind that? I mean, this is a big thing. What can be behind something like that?
Well, I can't think of any scientific valid reason for doing it. There could be political reasons or other things going on, but I can't think of any scientific reason why you would ignore the evidence and the facts and just push a one-size-fits-all ideology.
We also know that many people have objections to these vaccines because all three of them, in one way or the other, involved aborted children. There's no getting around that. And so if somebody has an objection to that, how is it that the government can wipe away religious liberty and say, you've got to get this, if you want to keep your job, you've got to get this?
For the government to mandate away your religious liberty is a real issue. And even the federal court has recognized that and put a stay on the mandate.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. Bob in Encino, California. Hello.
Yes, Dennis. On your dog is my co-pilot.
Right.
I don't know if I'd paint everyone with the same broad brush of you're mocking God. I know lots of dog lovers that would put that on their bumper as a sticker and not see it as mocking God, but are believers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I agree with you. I'm sure
then they're
those
naive. If they don't think it mocks God.
Well, yeah.
Isn't it a play on the words "God is my co-pilot" and "God backwards is dog"?
It is, but these I don't know. I know dog lovers. They just don't think that's their dog.
They don't think what?
It's me. There are those that put that out that would do that to mock God. I know that for sure.
All right. So all I'm saying is they're naive. Of course, it mocks God. You could say, the dog is my co-driver. Or you could say a million things about your dog. If you take a phrase that is "God is my co-pilot," I don't see this as debatable. God is my co-pilot is changed to dog is my co-pilot. I venerate dog more than God. And God backwards is dog. I'm not going to make the point anymore. It's so obvious to me. And Lori in Bloomington, Minnesota. Hello.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
I love God. Jesus is my Savior. But if I saw that bumper sticker, I would probably chuckle, only because there are so many dog lovers that have their dogs in the passenger seat or in their laps with their head out the window, that I guess I wouldn't be offended by it. I would just think it was maybe a play on words. I'm sorry, if that's offensive, but I probably would just get a chuckle out of it. And by the way, I am a cat lover.
Right.
Not
so you're
dog.
a cat lover and a God lover and find it funny.
Yes.
All right. No. Well, you
do.
have
Thanks,
credibility.
Dennis.
All
Bye-bye.
right. You're welcome. Take care. All right. Look, it's not the most important issue I've ever raised, but it's not an insignificant issue, or I wouldn't have raised it. I don't know why it's not obvious that it makes fun of God. Okay, that's it. The other driver is a dog. Wouldn't be as funny because it's not a play on God. The whole point of its humor is that it's a play on the word God. That is the reason it's funny. It's pretty obvious to me. Let me summarize your call here. Are you insecure just about a bumper sticker? Says Jay in Jersey City. I'm going to take it. It's too fascinating to me. Hello, Jay.
Yeah. Hey.
Hi.
Yeah. Let's be honest. It's an insignificant issue. It's like, who cares about a bumper sticker?
I do.
Really? Tell me how you know for a fact that God would be upset over a bumper sticker.
Yes.
How?
What if it said F God? Would God be upset?
God is the infinitesimal grandness, correct? So therefore, he does not care about these trivial things.
Okay. Well, okay.
You have something to say?
Yes, I do. Cursing God publicly, mocking God. If God doesn't care about it, you have a different definition.
So God is that petty. So is God petty?
Okay. No, it's not petty.
So then he doesn't care.
Huh? If God is not, no, that's your conclusion. God doesn't care about what is said about him.
Of you.
God doesn't care.
God is the supreme being.
Okay, I know that. God is the supreme being. That's correct. Public mockery of God is something God would care about if God exists and believes that he is necessary for a moral universe. So that people who mock the source of a good world are hurting the world. If God doesn't care about F God as a bumper sticker, would he care about it if it were on Times Square? What about God is a piece of and fill in the word? Would God care about that? God doesn't care because of ego reasons. God cares because of human reasons. Without the understanding of God, this world is kaput. So the mockery of the source of good on planet Earth is a big deal. And the fact that it came with the Bernie 2020 bumper sticker, in other words, I want a tiny God, but I want a gigantic government. Many of you don't think this is important. What then is important? If showing the correlation between those who want a big government also generally want a little God is not important, what is? What is important? It's mind-boggling to me. I'm actually now happy that I raised the issue because of the reactions that I'm getting. What people say publicly matters. If you want to call God a dog and play with that privately, that's your business. But once you do it publicly, it's my business. That's the way it works. I'll tell you this, if God wouldn't care, back to my last caller, if God wouldn't care, and therefore we shouldn't care, should people care about let's go Brandon? Or really the real words? Gee, is Biden petty if he cares if there's a gigantic chant of F you Biden? I would be opposed to it. And I hate Biden. I think he's scum. But I don't think Americans should chant that in public. All right? I have very, very defined elements. And public speech is truly significant. Public speech is a big deal. Cursing publicly is very different from cursing privately. That's an example. Public and private actions, urinating publicly is a big deal. Urinating privately is not a big deal. What if there were a bumper sticker of a guy peeing on a church? Would God be petty in caring about that? We'll be back.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Obama tore this country down. No one stood up to him. Nobody. Because he was black. You need to wake up.
Jewish house nigga. I didn't call you a nigga.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference.
You're Uncle Tom.
And Uncle Tom is somebody who has sold out by embracing the white man.
Uncle Tom,
Bedouin,
bootlicker,
black white supremacist,
chucking and jiving,
house Negro,
coon,
Uncle Tom,
coon.
I have a coon award over there. Most black people don't believe that other blacks can be independent, free thinkers.
I believe the legacy and the ancestry of black Americans is being insulted every single day. I will not pretend to be a victim in this country. I know that makes many people on the left uncomfortable.
The liberal will try to control a black person through the concept of racism because they know that we are very proud, emotional people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
History-making tax and spend disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And this is why people were so angry at the Republicans in the Senate and the House who have supported Biden's scheme. Did you hear Trump was giving a speech Monday night? The Republican Congressional Committee had a dinner, and he blasted the 13 Republicans in the House I think Nicole Maliotakis was in the room. She had to be squirming. Because I'm sure President Trump held back, as he does. I'm sure he was very genteel and, very discreet.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The recent war on history threatens to erase America's past. The Pilgrims, hailed by Movie Guide as inspiring, combats the lies to reveal America's true history.
They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible. The idea of self-government and rule from within, all these are within that body of Pilgrims.
The Pilgrims founded America for all intents and purposes.
Find out what everyone is talking about. Watch this new documentary to see God's providence in the lives of the Pilgrims.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Apparently, I can take calls on this for the rest of the month. But I won't. I will say for the record, some people I respect don't care about this bumper sticker in the sense that they don't think it mocks God. And that's fine. We have a difference of opinion on it. But the substitution of God with the dog and the Bernie sticker struck me as the correlation of big government, little God, which is in fact exactly what has happened in America since World War II. That's an undeniable issue. All right, so Rachel in Pasadena supports the bumper sticker, so do a lot of believers. It's okay, that's fair. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I think the most important point is, do you understand that as God gets small, the state gets big? Okay? Whether you think the bumper sticker is just a funny one, which is fine, or you think, by the way, you could think both. You could think the bumper sticker is funny, and the point is well taken, that as God gets smaller, the state gets bigger. That is exactly what has happened in the Western world. Exactly what has happened. The founders of the United States, those giants who founded the United States, understood that liberty and in God we trust are related. They are, in fact, indispensable. God is the pillar of liberty in the United States of America. That's why there is a verse from the Bible on the Liberty Bell. They couldn't have been more direct in their assertion, no God, no liberty. And that is exactly what is happening. Europe is less free than the United States and more secular. And as America gets more secular, freedom becomes far less of a value. So I have no issue really with those of you who find it to be funny, the bumper sticker. The larger issue of the Bernie 2020 and the bumper sticker is the one that I wanted most to bake. Okay, and that's the point that needs to be made. A lot of interesting calls, actually, but what am I going to do? Jim in Van Nuys, California says he found something more insulting. Science is my co-pilot. Yes. Well, look, I believe that for many people, of course, science has replaced God. The joke is the people for whom science has replaced God generally don't believe in science. They believe in scientists. And the two are not the same, as we have been discovering a great deal right now. The American Medical Association is made up of scientists, and it is about as woke an organization as you can find. New England Journal of Medicine does not use Latino, it uses Latinx. The American Medical Association has a new statement out. AMA calls for greater police accountability. What does this have to do with the AMA? Well, everything is public health. That's what they say. The AMA is strongly invested in the betterment. This is just out now. Is strongly invested in the betterment of public health and remains committed to advocating for actionable reform to eliminate excessive police violence in historically marginalized communities. Willie Underwood III, MD, MPH, Masters in Public Health. That's the killer. If you get a degree in public health, the odds are you're a left-winger. And a member of AMA's Board of Trustees. The AMA should close down. Doctors should insist on it. Doctors should form another one, the National Medical Association, the NMA. There you go. That's about as close a name as you can get. And I'm not asking it to be conservative in its politics. It shouldn't have politics. That's it. That's the point. Do these people not understand that half this country, they are breeding contempt for the medical profession, as I now have? Even though I readily acknowledge doctors have saved my life, doctors in my private life have done massive good. I'm deeply grateful to them. But I do not trust their profession on anything other than how do we treat Dennis right now with regard to this back surgery that he needs. They were fantastic. Wisdom does not come with an MD. How's that? And anti-wisdom comes with a public health degree. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384. One of the most magnificent things doctors have actually made is Relief Factor. Doctors made it to relieve your muscle and or joint pain. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenon. That's why you hear ads for it all over the country, TV, radio. And they have an interesting statement. If it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it probably won't work for you. So try it out for $19.95. Doesn't work, cancel the order. Doesn't work, you're out $19.95. Please try it. ReliefFactor.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
The only way we separate the good ideas from the bad ideas is to be free to say whatever we want about them.
There's no free speech for fascists.
Your posts on Facebook, Twitter, and social media will be saved to shame.
Creating an atmosphere of fear and repression, and it's gonna bust.
You cannot think differently.
It makes it difficult for you to learn from other people.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I want to remind you about the Sierra Pacific Mortgage, specifically andrewandtodd.com. These guys have been every day. They've been on the show in the sense of my endorsement with regard to getting you a loan on your house, whether it's a new one, a cash out refinance option, whatever it might be. And they did it from the first day of lockdown. What was it, February 2020? From the
lockdown didn't start
till when?
Until March or April.
All right, from March, whatever it was. I admire these guys. I've met them. They're honest. They take care of you, and there's no obligation. But if you are thinking of anything, whether it's refinance, cash out, which is related to refinance, financing a new house, call 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172, or go to andrewandtodd.com. They're with, again, Sierra Pacific Mortgage. It is quite remarkable. Some delegates pressed the association, that's the AMA, to take an even stronger position, one that advocates for reforming qualified immunity and the demilitarization of law enforcement. Do these people who want that, do they live in neighborhoods that are racked with violent crime? I'll bet they don't. God, I tell you, virtually every organization has been kidnapped by the left and is therefore been destroyed. Very, very sad. All right, listen, folks, I can't take any more God is my pilot calls, but I appreciate everybody wanting to talk about that. I do. Yes, okay. I'm just thinking about these calls. So Czech and Slovakia target unvaccinated with new restrictions. And yet I was, talk about mockery, I was mocked on the entire left because I had the audacity to say that the unvaccinated are pariahs at an even greater rate than gays were during the AIDS crisis. Were there laws banning gays from entering a restaurant or any public space that's banned to the unvaccinated? People wish them death? Well, some people might have, but they didn't publicly announce it like they do here. Don't treat the unvaccinated. You can say that now. Why should they be allowed to clog our hospitals? Murderers can clog, or at least be treated in hospitals, correct? Child rapists, if they're wounded as the police catch them, of course doctors should treat them. But the unvaccinated? America's lost more people since the bulk of the country got vaccinated than it did before the bulk of the country got unvaccinated. This is true in Europe too. They're basically announced the vaccines have a limited life. That's why you need a booster. Since when do vaccines need boosters? Have you had a vaccine booster for chickenpox or measles? And is that a fair question? Did you get a booster for them? Boosters. Even yellow fever, you get a second shot every 10 years. I've had a lot of yellow fever shots because of my travels to the third world. It's a very, very safe vaccine. I know I'm described as an anti-vaxxer because the left only knows how to smear. I've never spoken about vaccines in my life. But this is a brand new thing and it hasn't been tested enough. That's what I believe. The press hides every case of people being hurt by the vaccine.
You reported that story yesterday. You can't find it.
You can't find what?
Go trying to get information on problems with the vaccine.
Yes, you can't get information on problems with the vaccine if you do a normal Google search.
You read yesterday.
Yeah, probably not. Yes, I did. I know. You're right. I read that yesterday. So let's look this up. I'm very curious right now to see what is written, if anything. This will come as a very big surprise to most of you. Let's see here. So let's see, news. As, Celine Dion's fans issue desperate pleas over her health. After a new post. This is from when? Let's see. This is November 6th. The singer has remained quiet since postponing her Las Vegas residency. Celine Dion has kept a low profile since announcing she has postponed the start of her Vegas residency due to severe and persistent muscle spasms. Does anybody know why this all of a sudden happened? Well, the alternate press, not alt-right, just the alternate, the press that tells you what the mainstream media doesn't want to tell you, claims that it has to do with her getting a vaccine. I have no idea whether this is true, but if it is true, she has every reason not to announce it. This is worth looking into because of her fame. Right. Bob in Scranton, Pennsylvania takes offense that I called out the AMA. It's the American Motorcycle Association. Back in a moment.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Are you at all thinking about some relief on any of your mandates?
Listen, there's mandate fatigue everywhere, including with yours truly, so let there be no doubt about that. At the moment, no.
This guy is a scumbag. He is awful. Contrast that with Governor DeSantis, America's greatest governor, most courageous, and just announced his re-election campaign to become governor of Florida again. A well-deserved campaign of a man who has been overly courageous with now the lowest COVID rates in the country. Can you get if it's COVID rate, death rates, or virus rates? It's whatever it is. It's the lowest in the country. Pursuing alternative treatments like monoclonal antibodies. The first major state to reopen. Phenomenal economic figures, no mask mandates for children, and in the school districts that are doing that, DeSantis is clamping down. He banned critical race theory, and DeSantis has done this in a logical and reasonable way, I'm inspired by his leadership versus the weak Vichy French Republicans across the country that continually pander to Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. Ron DeSantis has been terrific. But Ron DeSantis understands the promise of the Constitution, unlike Murphy and most Republicans in the country, where Ron DeSantis says, a year and a half ago, we started with 15 days to slow the spread. Now it's get jabbed or lose your job. You see, what Ron DeSantis recognizes is that the sovereign is the people, not him. It's not we, the Ron DeSantis, or we, the governor of Florida. No, it's the people's rights that come first.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. Bill in Burbank, California. Hello.
Can you hear me, Dennis?
You're a little muffled, but I hear you.
I'm curious why the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine didn't work for you.
It's a bizarre question. How do you know they didn't work?
You got COVID.
Nobody ever said they prevent COVID. They said that they prevent it from becoming serious, which is exactly what happened with me.
I thought you, as far as I know, you went out and tried to become inoculated, or inoculated.
I wanted natural immunity. I got natural immunity. I have the best immunity you can get. It's far superior.
How do you know that?
How do I know it? Because there are 15 tests from the Cleveland Clinic to Israel that say the CDC is lying to you. If you believe the CDC but not 15 tests, fine. Okay, that's fair.
Can I bring you up to date on something, Dennis?
Can you bring up the data on something? Is that what you asked?
No, can I bring you up to date on something?
Sure.
You mentioned why we get boosters before. We get boosters for tetanus. We get boosters for flu. You get boosters for...
You don't get boosters for flu. You get a different flu shot every year for a different flu. And the tetanus is, I believe, every, I don't know, you only get it if you cut yourself on, let's say, a rusty nail, and then you haven't had it in, I don't know how many, 3 years, whatever it is. That would be a fine deal for me with this. They're giving you a booster the same year you got the original one, and never told you in advance you'll need a booster. So you get 2 shots, then a booster. There'll be a fourth booster, a second booster, a fourth shot. But I do want to make it clear, nobody ever said that hydroxychloroquine prevents, and zinc, they go together, or ivermectin prevents you from getting it. What it does is minimize the symptoms. My belief, and I stake a lot on this, I know I'm going out on a limb, given how much I differ with the New York Times and CNN and the rest of the liars that dominate the conversation on this issue. I believe at least 100,000 Americans have been killed by the media and by the American medical establishment by denying them therapeutics. Okay? And there are epidemiologists that I learned this from, like, Harvey Risch? Where is he?
Yale.
At Yale. He said on my show, hundreds of thousands of Americans' lives were killed by the medical establishment. And he's a medical man.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Creeps who've had some financial success in life. We're the bad. We need to be punished. Although not Pelosi. Did you hear she pushed back on the capital gains tax increase? She didn't like that, and she's a wealthy woman. But anyway, it turns out the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has taken a look at Build Back Better. They're saying about 30% of middle-income households will be taxed and pay additional taxes, have a tax increase in 2022. Whoops! No, say it isn't so, Joe. Say it isn't so. Come on.
Come on, man.
Did you lie to us again? Did you not tell the truth? And some low and middle class and middle income households, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, which has reviewed Build Back Better, they will pay more per year in taxes if the plan is implemented. You know, obviously they sat around the White House, they said, let's try this. Let's say that this massive spending won't cost anything. You know, it'll be a little bit like Biden calling Satchel Paige a Negro, and then we'll say he didn't call Satchel Paige a Negro. We'll see if they buy it. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. Just like free college is really free. Wink, wink. Bunch of liars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter is this. Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse, who was there to help people when he wasn't a community pool lifeguard. And that man shot to death the child rapist. Rot in hell. The second man, oh yes, with a rap sheet for what? Assaulting women. He got killed as well after he swung at Kyle Rittenhouse with a skateboard to his head. Not a lot of tears will be shed for that man, I'm sure, in any community of decent Americans. And then the third guy who approached him with a Glock pointed to Kyle's head, who then had his bicep blown off by that brave young man. Come on, guys. Acquit, or better yet, mistrial.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Then we are going to bring in innovative charter schools. Most people don't know that public charter schools are public schools, and so they fight against it. They worship the building instead of the child, and we're not going to just keep throwing money at that. In fact, I put in a charter school bill 20 years ago when I was first in office, but we were stopped.
Now, you know, let's pause there for a moment, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears. The appointments of the Secretary of Education and the Superintendent of Education are, I think, the 2 most important that Governor Youngkin, when he becomes Governor Youngkin, makes. Have you counseled with him on who those individuals ought to be and what their orientation ought to be towards charter schools?
Well, Governor-elect Youngkin, oh boy, do I love saying that. Governor-elect Youngkin has promised us he's going to fire the current superintendent. Day one, fire this current superintendent. Now, I believe he's going to have at least 2 appointments almost immediately on the board because, you know, they roll off.
Yes.
But the board has been stacked now for the past, but we can't really get rid of the policies that we have unless we get rid of some of the laws that we have, you see, because what they're doing is implementing the laws, which is why we needed the House, because we've got to bring back some of that and get rid of it, for example, CRT. And, you know, unfortunately, this left-wing media has been gaslighting us to let us know that, well, there is no such thing as CRT, when we have seen with our own eyes that back in 2015, the Virginia State Board of Education put it on their website and put books recommending the reading of such and the teaching of such.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Buddy, I'm Dennis Prager. I'm looking at the Worldometer, which is where I've gotten my info from the beginning. of the virus on deaths, cases, deaths per million. There are a number of sites to go to, but that's the easiest one for me to find the data on. So, you know, Sweden has never had a lockdown. They had school the entire year last year for kids under 16. People did not go around with masks. It was mocked by those who covered it. Oh, look how bad it is compared to Denmark and Norway, and which was entirely a result of nursing homes and immigrants that those countries did not have the same problem with regard to. And it's a tragedy, but that's not the issue. So if you look up new deaths on the chart of all the countries of the world, Sweden is one of the handful of countries. Let's see, how many countries are listed here? 224. And new death starts at 121, actually. So, yeah, it's actually half the world. Half the world's countries, not half the world's population. Half the world's countries had no new deaths 2 days ago. I don't look to today because those data are not supplied readily. So I always look up 2 days ago. Sweden had 0 deaths and no lockdowns, etc., etc. Sweden was right. The rest of the world was wrong. Sweden didn't panic. I don't know exactly why. Sweden is not generally considered a conservative country, and yet Sweden went its own merry way the entire time. You might have seen those pictures published of young people, well, any people, sitting in cafes, while I couldn't go anywhere in California, and you couldn't go anywhere in your state. There's now going to be a ban on the unvaccinated. They don't have that in Sweden. As I said, they had school. Sweden, in the deaths per million, which includes their terrible crisis in the nursing homes, is number 54. That's pretty low on a list. To give you an idea how low it is, 55 is St. Lucia, 56 is St. Martin, 57 is Costa Rica, 58 is Namibia. Okay, you get my point? Notice the lack of, almost total lack of European countries underneath. Now Germany is underneath in per million. However, Germany had 289 new deaths. Sweden had 0. Of course, Germany has more people, but still 0 is 0, and 289 is 289. Wonder what do Swedes think? I would love to know. I'd like to go to Sweden and conduct interviews. Does Sweden allow people in who are not vaccinated? Do you have any idea? You don't know, right? And do they count? A lot of countries do count those who have natural immunity. It's an article in Blaze Media, David Horowitz. Daniel, sorry. Okay. And it is now undeniable that in almost every part of North America, Europe, and East Asia, the pandemic is more prolific than it ever was before a single person was vaccinated. Which is an interesting point, I think, even though most of those countries have nearly every adult vaccinated. It's impossible to deny that vaccinologists like Geert van den Bossche and Luc Montagnier were correct when they predicted that mass vaccination was with a suboptimal non-sterilizing vaccine in the middle of a pandemic would create vaccine-mediated viral enhancement. Typical retort to this allegation that it's all the fault of the Delta and that somehow things would have been even worse without the vaccination. The problem with this assertion is that we are seeing the sharpest waves ever in the most vaccinated countries. How do people explain that?
The unvaccinated.
Oh, the unvaccinated?
Yeah.
But it's still, but there are more unvaccinated in less vaccinated countries.
I know.
Okay, I know. You're shaking your head. Okay. The fact that Sweden has never gotten a Delta wave demonstrates natural immunity alone would have ended this pandemic. Central and Eastern Europe are now on fire from the latest wave of the virus, which some researchers suspect is no longer Delta. So what is it? Gamma? Is there a new one? Is that the assertion that he's making? The one exception is Sweden. The Scandinavian country now has the second lowest case rate in all of Europe. That's fascinating, isn't it? And the Swedes, he writes, never experienced a single Delta wave. Even other Scandinavian countries like Iceland and Norway. Is Iceland considered a Scandinavian country? It is? I thought it's just Denmark. I know Finland is not.
It was settled by the Vikings.
Settled by the Vikings, and therefore it's considered, okay, fine. I was just curious. Even other Scandinavian countries like Iceland and Norway, which seemed nearly impervious to the virus until the past few months, are suffering their largest waves to date. Iceland has a wave? As you can see, we did that. No, I didn't. As you can see, even the Scandinavian countries, or other countries that currently have low case rates, all had one or two Delta waves since June, except for Sweden. It is self-evident that Sweden's natural immunity was able to preclude any major Delta wave, the only country in Europe to accomplish this feat. Although Sweden currently has a high vaccination rate, the Swedish government didn't start its vaccination drive until much later than the US, UK, and other countries that have had two Delta waves. According to the narrative, Sweden should have been particularly vulnerable to Delta, while the UK should have coasted through it. Instead, the opposite occurred. It wasn't the vaccination success that stemmed the tide of this variant in Sweden, because Ireland should be doing even better. It's that Sweden was lucky to have achieved herd immunity before the disastrous vaccination campaign made the pandemic worse. With most of the population likely already immune, they are not harmed by any form of vaccine-mediated viral enhancement. Nobody talks about Sweden anymore. Isn't that interesting? Well, we're having a vast number of cases. Deaths are up, and more people have been vaccinated. To say that it's caused by the unvaccinated is bizarre, because that means that the vaccinated are not really immune, are not really protected against the disease. It's so interesting. We'll keep the unvaccinated from restaurants and every place else, and bars and lounges and clubs and sporting events, etc. And what if that doesn't do anything? What will then be? Canada is Canada the only country that, maybe Singapore too, but Singapore is too small to fly within, so it may not apply. Is Canada the only country that bans travel on any public transportation, train, bus, plane, if you're not vaccinated? I'd be very curious to know. Can you fly across Australia if you're not vaccinated? But when I write that the unvaccinated are the pariahs of our time, like gays were in AIDS, or even more so, then the attack is staggering. Virtually every left-wing source featured me as a target, which doesn't bother me personally. I sleep like a baby. But it shows you how impervious they are all to truth. You should read my column this week. It's at DennisPrager.com, Town Hall, American Greatness, Daily Wire. I can't say it hasn't been covered by the half of the country that is not on the left, but people on the left never read us. We'll be back in a moment.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here. Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it again. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
Obama tore this country down. No one stood up to him. Nobody. Because he was black. You need to wake up.
Juice your house, nigga. I didn't call you a nigga.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference.
You're Uncle Tom.
And Uncle Tom is somebody who has sold out by embracing the white man.
Uncle Tom.
Bedwench.
Bootlicker.
Black white supremacist.
Chucking and jiving.
House Negro.
Coon.
Uncle Tom.
Coon.
I have a coon award over there. Most black people don't believe that other blacks can be independent, free thinkers.
I believe the legacy and the ancestry of black Americans is being insulted every single day. I will not pretend to be a victim in this country. I know that that makes many people on the left uncomfortable.
The liberal will try to control a black person through the concept of racism because they know that we are very proud, emotional people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
History-making tax and spend disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And this is why people were so angry at the Republicans in the Senate and the House who have supported Biden's scheme. Did you hear Trump was giving a speech Monday night? The Republican Congressional Committee had a dinner, and he blasted the 13 Republicans in the House. I think Nicole Maliotakis was in the room. She had to be squirming. Because I'm sure President Trump held back, as he does. I'm sure he was very genteel and, very discreet.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hey, I want to remind you that it's good to get a little truth into the House given what is done at our schools these days. Hillsdale has a great course, the Hillsdale 1776 curriculum. It's downloadable for free. k12hillsdale.edu, k12hillsdale.edu. This is designed to actually reveal everything, good, bad. We have a history of both. The sum total has been the best country ever made, in my opinion. I don't know if that's the sum judgment of the Hillsdale course, but if they tell the truth, it probably is. And I trust Hillsdale. So all you need to do is go to k12.hillsdale.edu. K12 means kindergarten to 12th grade. Hillsdale is Hillsdale, and EDU is educational institution. Again, it's free, the 1776 curriculum. k12hillsdale.edu. A very dear friend of mine is married to a Chinese woman. And I don't mean American Chinese, I mean Chinese Chinese. He met her in his many, many, many trips to China, where he has had business. And they fell in love, and they got married, and now they both live in America. So he sent me an interesting email. My wife said that what's happening in this country is worse than what happened during the Cultural Revolution in China. Why? Because in China, you only had to be concerned about what you said about Chairman Mao and the government. Here you have to be concerned with what you say about women, blacks, the transgendered, etc. It's a very important point. That's why I read it to you. We have a cultural revolution taking place. Now, people are not being beaten up yet, and they are not being sent to horrible re-education camps. That is correct. That is a difference, and it's an important difference. But they are losing their incomes. They are losing their reputations. They are losing their friends. They are losing their children. There are massive losses taking place. That's why people are afraid to come out of the closet. I'll tell you one of the major indictments of our lying media. Cowardly lying media. The herd. Every time there is a public figure that dies of COVID who was not vaccinated, you hear about it, right? Aren't there like five conservative talk show hosts who spoke out against the vaccine and died of COVID? And did you ever hear of any of them, by the way? I just wanted to check. I never heard of them, which is no knock on them in the least.
They were more, local.
Yes, they were local hosts. I don't know most local hosts. I think I know most national hosts. And they became national figures when they died for speaking out against the vaccine and dying. Okay. Why do I call the media lying? They didn't lie there. They lie by omission as much as commission. Can any of you name any, for example, I'll use just the world of athletes, any important athletes that have been injured by the vaccine? Of course not. That's not reported. I should report them regularly, actually. People who have been truly hurt by the vaccine. Only because honesty demands, if we're going to find out who anti-vax died of it, let's find out who pro-vax were horribly injured by it. So it would seem to be something that an honest press would report. There was a doctor who was online who gave up, and I don't blame him for giving up. He's been on for a while. He wanted to say that there are boosters for vaccines. What boosters are there for vaccines? See, the flu shot doesn't have a booster. You get a new flu shot because of a new flu strain. Did polio have a booster? I don't remember. But I don't remember any of them having boosters so quickly. The efficacy of this vaccine is so limited in time that nobody expected this. The boosters, the people who are boosters of the vaccine are probably a bit surprised if they allow themselves to have contrary thoughts in their mind as to how minimal the time frame is for the efficacy of the vaccines. But the CDC really told a real gigantic lie in denying that natural immunity is more robust than vaccine immunity. That's really something. That there will be people fired who have had COVID. How many Americans had COVID? Do we know? That would be an interesting figure. It's got to be tens of millions, obviously. So between those who were vaccinated and those who had COVID, that should always be added to the number of Americans who you believe have immunity. How many of the unvaccinated had COVID? That's an important number for us to be aware of. Yes. Marvin. I haven't met a Marvin in a while. Torrance, California. Hello.
Dennis, it's a pleasure. I'm probably the Marvin you're thinking about. It's been a few years since we've spoken. But I called in because you were talking about Sweden. I was just there beginning of September for about 2 weeks, and I tell you, it was like a breath of fresh air to the soul and the psyche. I think I may have saw 4 masks once I got outside of the airport in Stockholm. And the people that were wearing those were older people who probably, had, some concerns because of their age. But other than that, it was no mask. And it took a moment for my wife and I to stop thinking about, do we have our mask to go into here, go into there? And it's like, wait, we don't need to do that here,
I would love to visit Sweden. I'm curious, are you vaccinated?
Yeah, my wife and I are both vaccinated,
so
and
then,
I tell you the only reason we did it...
Can an unvaccinated person visit Sweden? Do you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Only thing, as a matter of fact, the only thing they care about is whether you've tested positive or not. In fact, when you...
All right, hold on. This is fascinating. I'd love to visit.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I've just heard so much about this, and nobody seems to be taking it seriously.
This is the exact reason that in normal science, this is not normal science by any stretch of the imagination, we do benefit risk analysis. And obviously that is different for each person. But here we're not doing that. We're just saying everybody needs to do this. And we're completely neglecting natural immunity, which is extremely important. We've recognized it for decades and decades before now. Now they won't even want to talk about it or acknowledge it at all.
What do you reckon is behind that? I mean, this is a big thing. What can be behind something like that?
Well, I can't think of any scientific valid reason for doing it. There could be political reasons or other things going on, but I can't think of any scientific reason why you would ignore the evidence and the facts and just push a one-size-fits-all ideology.
We also know that many people have objections to these vaccines because all three of them, in one way or the other, involved aborted children. There's no getting around that. And so if somebody has an objection to that, how is it that the government can wipe away religious liberty and say, you've got to get this, if you want to keep your job, you've got to get this?
You know, for the government to mandate away your religious liberty is a real issue. And even the federal court has recognized that and put a stay on the mandate.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager, and it is good to be with you. So I've been talking to Marvin in California. He just came back, or what was it, September? So came back 2 months ago from a trip with his wife to Sweden. Is your wife Swedish?
Yes, she is.
So
and we had to go because
I do remember your call from a long time ago. How do you like that? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
All right. So you're calling to tell me and my listeners how free you felt there, and how virtually no one but perhaps some aged people with comorbidities were wearing masks. So that would include waiters, correct?
Correct. No one. Not grocery store workers, waiters, waitresses. Nobody had on a mask. Like I said, I mean, even in the airport, once I got outside of
Wait a minute. At Stockholm Airport, people are not wearing masks?
I mean, most people still are, because you get off of the airplane and you have your mask on from being on the airplane. But once you got outside of the inner secure portion, once you picked up your luggage and you moved outside of there, people that are waiting for their family members or whomever they're picking up, they're not standing there with masks on. They're like, hey, you see their smiles when, you come out from your luggage.
Right. But it is an interesting question I would love to know the answer to, and you probably wouldn't have it. But I wonder if Stockholm Airport requires mask wearing. I would suspect
they
it
have
doesn't.
signs up saying.
It does?
No, they have signs up. They do have signs up. But
Why?
You know what?
Why would they do that? That's an interesting question, though. Why would they do that? Maybe because the rest of the world is paranoid, and they want people to feel comfortable using Stockholm Airport.
I think that's exactly it. It's kind of one of those, okay, we're going to tell people to wear your mask, in the terminal, but there's no one. I never got the sense that there was anyone who would ever walk up to you and say, "Excuse me, would you please put your mask on?"
Did you discuss this issue with your wife's family?
A little bit, and friends as well. Like, friends of hers that we went and saw while we were there. It's like, how do you guys feel about this? They were like, hey, we're just living life. We're fine. Many people are vaccinated, but even before then, it was they just had that feeling of, if you had a concern about being anywhere, or if you didn't feel well, you stay away.
That's right. That's the way it should be. Thank you, Marvin. It's always good, even if it's a gap of years, it's always good to talk to you. I mentioned, I think yesterday, I don't wear a mask in airports. If I'm fined, I'll pay the fine. I would put up a struggle. I wear it when I walk onto the plane because I don't want the flight attendants to be vigilant with my regard. I will tell you, and you know how much I fly, or many of you do, that it's truly a 50-50 roulette wheel. I mean, there's it's a crapshoot, to use another gambling term, whether or not there is a flight attendant who will bother you about your mask. And I never give them a hard time. I say fine. I always go fine and live with the consequences. But in the airport, if somebody were to say, why aren't you wearing a mask? I would say, because I had COVID. I'm probably one of the safest people in this airport. Certainly statistically safer than people who have been vaccinated. One country in the world seemed to have defied what happened. Penny in Indianapolis. Hello, Penny.
Yes, I've been watching the numbers that same.
Wait, Penny, talk into your phone. Don't use the speakerphone, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've been watching at the same site you are for the statistics. We have friends in India. They have a 28% vaccination rate opposed to our 58.8%. They have a population of, I believe, 1.38 billion people, while we have, 340
Yes,
million?
in fact, thank you for pointing it out. I saw your call. I went to the site of the world's countries, and India has 332 deaths per million people. The United States, 2,357. That's as important as the Swedish statistic. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384. You'll know in 3 weeks if it works, so they have a 3-week price. $19.95. That's it. That's the way you try it out for 3 weeks. It works or doesn't work. Doesn't work, cancel your agreement or your order, whatever it is. But please try it if you have any muscle or joint pain. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here. Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Prayer is a a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work. If you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it. I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
Obama tore this country down. No one stood up to him. Nobody. Because he was black. You need to wake up.
Choose your house, nigga. I didn't call you a nigga. Oh, okay. That's a big difference. You're Uncle Tom.
And Uncle Tom is somebody who has sold out by embracing the white man.
Uncle Tom,
Bedwench,
bootlicker,
black white supremacist,
chucking and jiving,
house Negro,
coon,
Uncle Tom,
coon.
I have a coon award over there. Most black people don't believe that other blacks can be independent, free thinkers.
I believe the legacy and the ancestry of black Americans is being insulted every single day. I will not pretend to be a victim in this country. I know that that makes many people on the left uncomfortable.
The liberal will try to control a black person through the concept of racism because they know that we are very proud, emotional people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Okay, all. Dennis Prager here with you. Pleasure indeed. Wall Street Journal. College, this is by the president of the College of the Ozarks. And his name is Davis. I don't have the first name here. President Davis. College of the Ozarks faces an existential threat as a federal court will hear on Wednesday, so that's yesterday. The Biden administration has declared that we must start letting men into our young women's dorm rooms, showers, and locker rooms, or else face the wrath of the federal government. The Biden administration issued a February memo under the Fair Housing Act declaring it will eradicate housing discrimination, unquote. If we don't cease what it calls gender identity discrimination, the federal government will punish our 115-year-old institution via laws that were written to stamp out racism. College campuses have certainly been super spreaders for the sexual revolution, and since then some campuses implemented co-ed dorms. But until now, no one has forced private colleges to reject the wisdom of having separate dorms for men and women, half of whom are teenagers. Nor has the government compelled colleges to deny the basic biological reality that there are two sexes. College of the Ozarks has a singular purpose: to provide a top-notch Christian education for students who cannot afford to attend college elsewhere, Our religious beliefs define who we are. In the safety, comfort, and privacy of women, is the safety, comfort, and privacy of women on our campus to be sacrificed so that men can live in women's dorms? Does radical gender ideology, which defies biological science and common sense, trump the religious beliefs of College of the Ozarks that are guaranteed protection by the Constitution? The Biden administration's action does not apply only to us. Its directive covers every college in the country that accepts students from the general public, whether or not the colleges receive federal funds. The president's minions did this without an iota of public input, no notice, no opportunity to submit comments, and thus no responses to objections. Well, wherever the left takes over, there is a coercive state. That is the fact of life. And yet, people who claim to love liberty vote for the Democratic Party, which is just a left-wing party at this time. It used to be, it used to have a lot of liberals, and now they're all leftist. Imagine that. You have to have co-ed dorms. Who does that benefit? The interesting thing is the same people who want to force co-ed dorms are the people who want all black dorms. Isn't that fascinating? Fascinating is an understatement indeed. Oh boy, everybody. This is all a result of people needing purpose. So this is what the left is about. Needing purpose. And they find this. I'm reflecting on the. I'm sorry.
Take a look at this. I'm sending you something right now.
I'm reflecting on the comment of my Chinese friend there, married to my American friend. How does she feel coming from China to the National Review piece? How does it feel to come from a communist country to the sweet land of liberty and see it become like the communist country you left? Well, Yeonmi Park, that's Park. She's the best example. Her brilliant. You should see. People have said that the favorite interview of my life, and I have a lot of great interviews, if I may say so, is the one my fireside chat with Yeonmi Park, the woman who escaped North Korea. There are only, I think, 200 North Koreans living in the United States. She spoke again at the Prager Gala this past weekend. She said that she heard more anti-American propaganda getting her graduate degree at Columbia University than she even did in North Korea. It's probably true. I suspect they spend more time at Columbia crapping on the United States than they do at Pyongyang University. I suspect. I'm not saying I know it to be true. Imagine how she felt. Is there a word about North Korea or about communism? Look, when I was at Columbia, they didn't tell you about the evils of communism. This is from today's National Review. You can't obey your way to normal. I've been saying for some time now, This is Michael Brendan Dougherty. I've been saying for some time now that there is no possibility of obeying our way to normalcy when it comes to COVID-19. It's an interesting thought. I'll read to you more and take your calls. When we return, I'm Dennis Prager.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So why?
Testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the
Don't
testimony.
get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that. That's number one.
I have to tell you, I haven't sat in front of a lot of judges in real time. I did it once for a speeding ticket in my life. I have watched many trials on TV, real ones. I don't think I've ever seen a judge as pissed as that. He actually looked, if you weren't watching on the video, he looked infuriated. He was jumping up in his seat and he said, "Don't get brazen with me," to the deputy district attorney. Look, predictions, it's a mug's game. But right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter of this, Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
There's a very intelligent little piece here by Michael Dougherty. You can't obey your way to normal. In other words, no matter what we do, it will never be enough with regard to COVID. So it's very interesting. Consider Ireland, which went through one of the longest periods and harshest lockdowns in the Western world, and emerged from this state only slowly and with the imposition of vaccine passports. They have vaccine passports in Ireland. Ireland is one of the highest vaccination rates in Europe. And yet, as case numbers ticked upward a tremendous amount of pressure from the media came on the government and its national public health emergency team to do something. Ireland's version of Tony Fauci is now responding. Tony Holohan just said to Kieran Cuddihy on News Talk, quote, that's Irish News Talk, I presume, yes, it's likely that masks and distancing will be with us indefinitely, unfortunately. If Ireland, he adds, the writer now, if Ireland hasn't obeyed enough, nobody can. The same is seen all over Europe. As acquiescence builds upon acquiescence, now there are attempts to control the pandemic by just locking in the unvaccinated. It won't work. The only way out of this in America is to stop following CDC's guidelines, just the way we already do in so many other domains of life. That's right. That's why I don't wear a mask at airports. I go on the plane with it, but I don't wear it. But do you know that there are websites that sell masks that you can breathe through? You know how many people, if they could choose that, would do it? Because the masks are a joke. There's a video up, unless YouTube took it down, of somebody exhaling vapor or smoke through the mask. Those particles are larger than the viral particles. They stop nothing, the masks. Don't tell me surgeons wear them. Surgeons don't wear them because of virus. They wear them because there's an open body beneath them. That's what surgery is about. There is no limit to the number of laws they will pass. The writer is right.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Are you at all thinking about some relief on any of your mandates?
Listen, there's mandate fatigue everywhere, including with yours truly, so let there be no doubt about that. At the moment, no.
This guy is a scumbag. He is awful. Contrast that with Governor DeSantis, America's greatest governor, most courageous, and just announced his re-election campaign to become governor of Florida again. A well-deserved campaign of a man who has been overly courageous with now the lowest COVID rates in the country. Can you get if it's COVID rate, death rates, or virus rates? It's whatever it is. It's the lowest in the country. Pursuing alternative treatments like monoclonal antibodies. The first major state to reopen. Phenomenal economic figures. No mask mandates for children. And in the school districts that are doing that, DeSantis is clamping down. He banned critical race theory, and DeSantis has done this in a logical and reasonable way, and I'm inspired by his leadership versus the weak Vichy French Republicans across the country that continually pander to Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. Ron DeSantis has been terrific. But Ron DeSantis understands the promise of the Constitution, unlike Murphy and most Republicans in the country, where Ron DeSantis says, a year and a half ago, we started with 15 days to slow the spread. Now it's get jabbed or lose your job. You see, what Ron DeSantis recognizes is that the sovereign is the people, not him. It's not we, the Ron DeSantis, or we, the governor of Florida. No, it's the people's rights that come first.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
I've just heard so much about this, and nobody seems to be taking it seriously.
This is the exact reason that in normal science, this is not normal science by any stretch of the imagination, we do benefit risk analysis. And obviously that is different for each person. But here we're not doing that. We're just saying everybody needs to do this. And we're completely neglecting natural immunity, which is extremely important. We've recognized it for decades and decades before now. Now they won't even want to talk about it or acknowledge it at all.
What do you reckon is behind that? I mean, this is a big thing. What can be behind something like that?
Well, I can't think of any scientific valid reason for doing it. There could be political reasons or other things going on, but I can't think of any scientific reason why you would ignore the evidence and the facts and just push a one-size-fits-all ideology.
We also know that many people have objections to these vaccines because all three of them, in one way or the other, involved aborted children. There's no getting around that. And so if somebody has an objection to that, how is it that the government can wipe away religious liberty and say, you've got to get this, if you want to keep your job, you've got to get this?
For the government to mandate away your religious liberty is a real issue. And even the federal court has recognized that and put a stay on the mandate.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here. Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it. I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hello, my friends. I'm Dennis Prager. How did the virus originate? It's the subject of a brand new book, and it is titled Viral: The Search for the Origin of COVID-19 by Alina Chan and Matt Ridley. And do we have Matt Ridley up on Skype? Are we? Yeah, excellent. How do you do there? Matt Ridley is, let me just introduce you properly, best-selling science writer, member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom, and you've co-authored this book, Viral: The Search for the Origin of COVID-19. All right, welcome to the show.
Hello, it's nice to be on the show with you.
That's wonderful. Are you in London right now?
I'm in Newcastle in northern England, but yeah, I'm in the UK.
How far is Newcastle from Leeds?
About 100 miles further north.
Because I studied in Leeds for a year, so I have some sense. By the way, do they say any longer that's like bringing coal to Newcastle, or is that phrase dead?
No, well, it's still alive as a metaphor, but there's not much coal being mined in this area anymore.
Hold on, we're getting an echo here. Am I the only one hearing an echo? You're hearing one too? Okay, forgive me, sir. I will give it another try. And anyway, that's a very famous phrase, but I'll bet you young Americans never heard of it, coal to Newcastle. Anyway, coal is so polluting. Oh, they don't want to bring coal to Newcastle. So tell me, did anything in your excellent detective work surprise you? Or did you go in thinking that your conclusions would be what they are?
No, we did not. I should say my co-author on this book, Alina Chan, is a brilliant young scientist at Harvard and MIT. She's an expert in genomics and molecular biology and that kind of thing. So she's a huge expert on this sort of stuff. And she and I both thought in the spring of 2020 that this was probably a natural event in a market in Wuhan, that an animal had been sold to someone which had a virus in it, and that's how the whole thing started. Because that's how SARS started. That's essentially how MERS started. That's how these coronavirus outbreaks usually begin. So we thought, it's important to explore all possibilities. But we got a bit disturbed by the way people were ruling out the other alternative, that it was a laboratory accident, as a conspiracy theory early on. They were doing so on the basis that not on any specific evidence, but because they just wanted to rule it out as a possibility. And so we began to look into this. We said the evidence actually is not very good. There doesn't seem to be any case of infected animals. We now know, 2 years in, that after 18 months of searching, they've not been able to find infected animals at all in China. 80,000 animals have been tested. None of them turned out to have this virus in them, except those who've since caught it from human beings during the pandemic. Whereas the evidence that this might have occurred as a result of an accident in a laboratory has become stronger and stronger. There's one lab in the world that focuses on SARS-like coronaviruses above all others, and publishes more data on them and collects more viruses, tens of thousands of viruses, and studies them and manipulates them and analyzes them. That lab is in a city called Wuhan.
Amazing. So was there one eureka moment, as we say? I don't know if it's international in the English-speaking world, but was there this moment when the two of you said, oh my God, it started in a lab?
No, and we haven't concluded that for certain. We end the book with presenting the best case we can for it still being a natural origin, the best case we can for it being a laboratory origin, and then a call for an independent evaluation. but we both now lean towards the conclusion that it was a laboratory event. And I will mention one moment, right towards the end of writing the book, in September this year, when we'd already finished the book and we were just revising the last few revisions. And then a document dropped, which was a grant application made in 2018 by the EcoHealth Alliance, which is a foundation in the US that funds research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And what that document said was that the scientists, in collaboration with the Wuhan scientists, wanted to try inserting a particular genetic sequence into SARS-like coronaviruses, novel ones that they were just finding, over the next few years, in order to make them easier to grow in cells in the laboratory. Now that is the sequence, the exact feature that appears in the genome of this virus and in no other SARS-like coronavirus. And it looked odder and odder over recent months. This stands out from all the other features, all the other SARS-like coronaviruses, in having this feature, which is what makes it so infectious, what makes it capable of causing a pandemic. And until this point, we had no direct evidence that anyone was thinking of doing an experiment of putting one of these into this particular kinds of viruses. We knew they were capable of putting this sequence into other viruses, but we didn't know they had a plan to do it. Now, the scientist who put that application into the Department of Defense in the United States was on the World Health Organization investigation into the origin of the pandemic, was the organizer of a letter to the Lancet ruling out a laboratory origin. And never once in 2 years had he thought to mention that he was part of a plan to put this sequence into a similar kind of virus at some point. And he still hasn't explained himself. His name is Peter Daszak. We'd love to ask him. He blocked us on Twitter the moment we started asking him questions. It's a very odd situation, this, because we're not here to say it definitely came from a laboratory, but we are here to say there have been lots of laboratory leaks of viruses in the past. SARS leaked 6 times from labs. If a virus like this was in a lab and was experimented, then it's very likely that the researchers would get infected, would catch a cold, if they were working at low biosecurity levels, at biosecurity level 2, where you basically just wear a mask and gloves. And they were. That's the level they were doing these experiments at. As I say, there's no other lab in the world that was doing as many experiments on SARS-like coronaviruses than Wuhan. So if it's a coincidence, it's an enormous and extraordinary coincidence. And so, in the interests of satisfying people like me, the scientists ought to come forward and say, look, here's everything we know about what went on in that lab. Here's all the experiments we did, all the experiments we were planning, all the viruses we sampled in the wild, all the viruses we brought back from thousands of miles away. These viruses don't live near Wuhan, by the way. They're from thousands of miles away. Here's all the evidence. And you can see that none of this involves anything like this virus, and therefore we're innocent. But the fact that we have to extract this information by leaks and freedom of information requests and open source analysts going into Chinese websites and looking for obscure theses and other documents just leaves us saying, well, are you trying to hide something?
Yeah, one would think so. I want to go back to something you mentioned, and I just didn't want to interrupt you, that there was, in the beginning, there was suppression of anyone or any tweet that would suggest that it was developed in a lab, the virus. Who was doing that? Who in the media, or if not media, who in politics? Who was doing the suppressing?
It's a very good question. And you're right that for up until May of this year, any discussion in the media of a lab leak was called a conspiracy theory by mainstream media, newspapers, New York Times, other ones like that. They would simply label it. This is a conspiracy, along with, the idea that the 5G phone signal is causing the pandemic. That sort of mad conspiracy theory.
All right, hold it there if you would. Forgive me, but I want to promote your book, if that's okay with you. Viral, yeah. The Search for the Origin of COVID-19. Matt Ridley is the co-author with Alina Chan, the scientist, and we will be back in a moment.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here. Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it. I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
Obama tore this country down. No one stood up to him. Nobody. Because he was black. You need to wake up.
You was your house nigga. I didn't call you a nigga.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference.
You're Uncle Tom.
And Uncle Tom is somebody who has sold out by embracing the white man.
Uncle Tom,
bedwench,
bootlicker,
black white supremacist,
chucking and jiving,
house Negro,
coon,
Uncle Tom,
coon.
I have a coon award over there. Most black people don't believe that other blacks can be independent, free thinkers.
I believe the legacy and the ancestry of black Americans is.
And this is why people were so angry at the Republicans in the Senate and the House who have supported Biden's scheme. Did you hear Trump was giving a speech Monday night? The Republican Congressional Committee had a dinner, and he blasted the 13 Republicans in the House. I think Nicole Maliotakis was in the room. She had to be squirming. Because I'm sure President Trump held back, as he does. I'm sure he was very genteel and, very discreet.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The Pilgrims. They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible.
Not only did they start self-rule, they started free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years with 51 people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
In England, is Matt Ridley, member of the House of Lords, a best-selling science writer, and he has co-authored with an MIT Harvard scientist, Alina Chan. Got a lot of, now we have a lot of noise coming through. I'm sorry, folks. Do you hear the static that I'm hearing? Yeah. All right. Well,
I did.
Hi there. I'm sorry, we're having a bout of audio problems that we did not have in the first segment. Tremendous amount of background noise. Yeah, we can't. Okay.
Is that better?
Totally better.
That must have been my earphones that were doing it. I'm sorry.
Quite all right, sir. We do this for a living. You don't. So
I was trying to help you with the echo. But
I know that. So. All right, so the book is viral, The Search for the Origin of COVID-19. It is up at DennisPrager.com. I had asked you about your assertion, which of course I knew to be true, about how early reports that it might come from a lab, the virus, were dismissed as conspiracy talk, conspiracy thinking. And you mentioned the New York Times. Was this as true in the British press as in America?
Yes, mostly it was. And it was true on a lot of social media too. So Facebook basically banned any discussion of the laboratory leak. And, you know, the specific labeling of it as a conspiracy. I mean, by definition, an accident in a laboratory is not a conspiracy. It's an accident. You know, it's not a sort of plot. But also, it started from the wrong premise that this was an unlikely thing to happen. We now know that laboratory accidents happen all the time. I mean, we knew that anyway. As I say, SARS has leaked from a laboratory 6 times in 2003 and 4. There was a outbreak that killed 80 people caused by a laboratory accident in Sverdlovsk in Russia involving anthrax. Just last year in China, there was a brucellosis outbreak caused by a laboratory accident. There was a laboratory accident in which hantavirus infected some students who were working on mice in southern China. And the person who investigated that and said, hang on, this is coming from your own procedures in your laboratory, was Dr. Shi Zhengli, the head of the Wuhan Institute of Virology Bat Virus Lab, who's the one who's insisting that this couldn't have happened in this case. So it's not implausible to think that this would happen in the laboratory, which I keep coming back to saying, does the most research on bat-borne coronaviruses, SARS-like coronaviruses. But there was a determined attempt by scientists in the West, as well as by the Chinese government, to rule out this possibility from the start and to say it wasn't possible to discuss it. We're not trying to say it's definitely the answer. We're trying to say let's have an open-minded discussion as to whether it was that or whether it was a natural event.
So here then is the 64,000-pound question. Was it manufactured in the lab?
Probably not. The vast bulk of the virus genome is natural. This is a bat virus. We know that. Horseshoe bats are carrying very similar, 95, 96% similar viruses in the wild. So the basic chassis of this virus is a wild, non-manufactured genome. But when you bring it into the laboratory, you can manipulate it. You can add genes and subtract genes. They were doing this routinely with these kinds of viruses. And it's very possible that this virus has had a particular sequence added to it, which they were doing in a number of similar viruses in order to make them easier to grow in the laboratory. So it's a tiny addition, but enough to make a big difference. And when you come to, if you want to lend a virus to another laboratory in another country, you don't send the virus, you send the sequence of the genes, literally the letters, 30,000 letters, and they then synthesize it from scratch. So it is possible to do that. It is possible to start simply from the recipe for the virus and make a new one, but you wouldn't be making a man-made recipe, you'd be making a natural recipe with a few tweaks.
Yeah, but a natural recipe with a few tweaks, how does that differ from saying it was manufactured in the lab? It didn't happen in nature. The tweaks make it man-made.
Right, but the tweaks are copied from other viruses because you know that those tweaks make it more infectious in cells in the laboratory. And just to be clear here, some of the experiments done in Wuhan on SARS-like viruses, not on this particular type of SARS-like virus, but a very similar one, in the period up to 2019, we now know from documents that emerged quite recently, did result in greater infectivity and greater disease in humanized mice, to the tune of, in one case, 10,000 times. So, they were capable of tweaking a virus so that it was much more dangerous to a mouse, which has human genes in it. Now, that's a dangerous experiment to be doing, a risky experiment to be doing. It was done at biosecurity level 3, which is appropriate, but all the same, I have to say, as somebody who's followed biotechnology for years and is a huge fan of it, I am concerned that experiments like this were being done.
Well, being British, you're a master of the understatement. Again, I return to my belief, it is man-made, this virus. If it weren't for human beings, this virus would not exist. Is that correct?
No, I can't say that for sure, no. It might be that this is a natural virus that they collected in the wild and that escaped in the laboratory without any
right. Okay, fair enough.
Another possibility.
Yes. Okay, I know. I accept that.
Remember, it is still possible that it was a natural event. Somebody in the wild.
Right. Though you believe the evidence seems to suggest, and you're very fair in the book, and you say both are possible, and I understand that, and you've said that now. On the assumption that it was not 100% from a bat, let us say, then it is human created. So if that is the case, I'd like to know, why do we do this at all? Why would we create horrible viruses?
Right, that's a very good question. What was the purpose of this research? Some people say, well, they were trying to make a bioweapon. Other people say they were trying to make a vaccine. The main purpose of the research...
All right, again, hold it. I'm going to keep everybody in suspense. I want to just show them the book, and it is truly fascinating reading. It is up at DennisPrager.com. Viral, the search for the origin of COVID-19. Lord Matt Ridley, the co-author, with the scientist Alina Chan.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So why?
Testimony, Your Honor.
Pardon me?
That was before the
Don't
defense testimony.
get brazen with me. You knew very well. You know very well that an attorney can't go into these types of areas when the judge has already ruled without asking outside the presence of the jury to do so. So don't give me that. That's number one.
I have to tell you, I haven't sat in front of a lot of judges in real time. I did it once for a speeding ticket in my life. I have watched many trials on TV, real ones. I don't think I've ever seen a judge as pissed as that. He actually looked, if you weren't watching on the video, he looked infuriated. He was jumping up in his seat and he said, "Don't get brazen with me," to the deputy district attorney. Look, predictions, it's a mug's game. But right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter is this. Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Are you at all thinking about some relief on any of your mandates?
Listen, there's mandate fatigue everywhere, including with yours truly, so let there be no doubt about that. At the moment, no.
This guy is a scumbag. He is awful. Contrast that with Governor DeSantis, America's greatest governor, most courageous, and just announced his re-election campaign to become governor of Florida again. A well-deserved campaign of a man who has been overly courageous with now the lowest COVID rates in the country. Can you get if it's COVID rate, death rates, or virus rates? It's whatever it is. It's the lowest in the country. Pursuing alternative treatments like monoclonal antibodies. The first major state to reopen. Phenomenal economic figures. No mask mandates for children. And in the school districts that are doing that, DeSantis is clamping down. He banned critical race theory, and DeSantis has done this in a logical and reasonable way. And I'm inspired by his leadership versus the weak Vichy French Republicans across the country that continually pander to Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. Ron DeSantis has been terrific. But Ron DeSantis understands the promise of the Constitution, unlike Murphy and most Republicans in the country, where Ron DeSantis says, a year and a half ago, we started with 15 days to slow the spread. Now it's get jabbed or lose your job. You see, what Ron DeSantis recognizes is that the sovereign is the people, not him. It's not we, the Ron DeSantis, or we, the governor of Florida. No, it's the people's rights that come first.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm speaking with Matt Ridley, member of the House of Lords in the UK. He is in Newcastle right now, and we're doing this via Skype if you want to watch it. And he's a best-selling science writer. He has co-authored with a scientist, Alina Chan of MIT and Harvard, The Search for the Origin of COVID-19. The book is titled Viral. So my last question was, if it was tampered with by human beings to become the virus and ultimately the pandemic caused by this virus, why would anybody do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What they were trying to do was prevent the next pandemic by finding candidate viruses that could cause pandemics, testing in the laboratory and saying, we've found this one that's not dangerous and this one that is dangerous. So when we detect this one cropping up in human populations, we're ready for it. We're ready to go. We can stop it. That was the purpose of the research. In the wake of SARS and MERS, a huge amount of money went into this so-called pandemic preparedness research, sampling animals in the wild for their viruses, saying which one's going to jump into the human species next. Now, there were a bunch of virologists who said this is not a good idea. A, you're unlikely to find the next one. And B, if you do, it's not clear that you'll be able to prevent it taking off. Indeed, you might make it worse. You might make it take off. And that's particularly going to be true if you manipulate it in the lab to try and get it to grow in the lab, because it's not very easy to grow these things, to study them in the lab. If you try and improve its ability to infect cells, then you might be doing the very thing you're trying to prevent. At the very least, that research program failed. It failed to warn us about this pandemic. But quite probably, possibly, it was worse than that. It caused this pandemic.
Well, if it was manipulated by humans, why would you say quite possibly?
Well, because we don't know that it was manipulated by humans.
Okay, fine. So, all right, I understand your answer. Entertaining the possibility that it really did originate in animals, But if it did originate in, I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the big issue here is that the Chinese authorities and the scientists involved won't tell us the full set of information. They have a database with 22,000 virus samples in it, pathogen samples, most of which are viruses, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They took it offline in September 2019, just before the pandemic, which is strange, and they won't put it back up. They won't share it with us. They won't say, look, here's all the viruses we collected. Take a good look. Convince yourself that none of them are the cause of this pandemic. Why won't they do that?
Because they don't want to be held responsible.
Maybe.
I can't think of another reason. What is the role of the United States in the Wuhan lab and in this research?
Well, most of the work being done in Wuhan was funded by the Chinese Academy of Sciences and other Chinese funds, and most of the work was being done by Chinese scientists. So we shouldn't over-exaggerate the role of the United States. But a significant income stream and a significant degree of advice and collaboration was coming from the United States, particularly through a foundation called the EcoHealth Foundation, EcoHealth Alliance, which was getting up to $17 million a year from the US government to spend on this kind of work. And a lot of it was going to Wuhan. And they were basically a conduit for US taxpayer funds to this kind of research. And they were very close. You know, they were good friends. They joked on social media about karaoke parties, etc. And when the pandemic broke, the EcoHealth Alliance sprang to the defense of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And its leader then orchestrated a letter to the Lancet saying, the one thing we can be sure of is this didn't come out of a laboratory, when we knew very little about it.
Is this Peter Daszak?
That is Peter Daszak.
And
he's given an interview to Science magazine saying that today, just saying, I've done nothing wrong, I'm just expressing my opinion, etc. But originally he was saying we can rule out a laboratory leak. He's now saying we can't rule it out, but it's very unlikely. Well, give him another few months.
So he would maintain that it's a coincidence that we have the Chinese have this lab there, and bats that are infected also live there. China is a gigantic country, and they just both happen to be neighbors.
Right. So the what most people think is that the lab was built in Wuhan because that's where the risk of spillover was. That's not true. These kind of SARS-like viruses are not found in the bats in that area. There's been extensive sampling of bats.
All right, we'll continue that in a moment. Forgive me, but this is how American private radio succeeds. Back in a moment, the author of the book Viral up at my website. Nerve Renew is one of the few products I ever asked to advertise on my program because it was so effective in my case. Many of you have tingling, numbness, etc. in extremity, namely hands or feet. I had it in feet much of my life. Shoe inserts were built for me, conforming to my foot. They worked, except when I took my shoes off. Then I read about Nerve Renew, started taking it, and about 9 months later, I threw away the inserts. I have never worn them since. If you have this, go to trynerverenew.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
And that's why religious people are far more patriotic, frankly, about the Constitution, because they don't believe those rights were given to them by the state, but rather by something larger. And in Europe, I don't think that people believe that. They used to turn to monarchies, then they turned to fascism and communism, at least in the last 100 or more years, and it doesn't seem to work. And now they're just turning towards the European Union and bureaucrats to sort of guide them as their new priests.
One of the reasons I am always curious about why Europe went this way, but why America admires it, how come we got this disease when it's clearly not working? And I think the answer is in what I call the semester abroad disease. It's like mad cow disease. If you spend a semester abroad when you're 21, you have a wonderful time. You eat well, you have a party for 6 months, and then you come home and you extrapolate from that everything must be like being a student in Europe for 6 months when there's nothing at all to do with an American having fun in Europe for 6 months. David, this all started to rise in the United States when we started to ship our college students away for a semester in Florence. And then they come back and they think, wow, Europe is great.
That as well, I had thought about that, but also just tourism, right? I mean, when we go to Europe, it's beautiful. When people go to Hungary, they sit by the river, the Danube, and sip coffee. But in the real world, about a mile out of the city, things aren't that way. The American home, I think on average, I might be wrong about this, but it's close. It's about 1,000 square feet bigger than the average European home. We live in mansions in our suburbs that most Europeans would not be able to comprehend.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Did he make a... Well, there's a lot of clarifying taking place this hour, and that's very important to me, as you all know. I'm Dennis Prager, speaking to Matt Ridley, a member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom, but best known to us as a science writer for many years. He has co-authored with Alina Chan, a scientist at MIT and Harvard, The Search for the Origin of COVID-19. The book is viral. So we were talking about what the purpose was, and then we came to the issue of, well, if it was animal-based, as some still claim, I said to you, is it just a coincidence that the animals, or the bats in this case, lived in the neighborhood of the Wuhan lab? And then you were saying that that's not necessarily the case. Is that correct?
No, that's right. People think that the lab was built there because there are bats in the area that carry these viruses. That's not true. Bats have been tested extensively around Wuhan, and they don't carry these SARS-like viruses. The bats that carry the SARS-like viruses live much further south. They live 1,000 miles further south in Yunnan and Guangdong provinces, and just into Southeast Asia, Laos and Thailand and places like that. So the conundrum we have to solve is how a virus that would normally be in a bat 1,000 miles away reached Wuhan. And it could have happened with a wildlife trader bringing an animal to the market, but there's not that much wildlife trade in Wuhan compared with further south. And if it did happen, then it would have gone to other cities too, because these guys supply lots of different cities. The one group of people that we know traveled all the way south, more than 1,000 miles, went into caves, caught bats, swabbed their noses and their anuses to pick up traces of viruses, and took those samples directly to Wuhan and nowhere else were scientists. And they were doing that on a significant scale. So, pure common sense tells you you've got to take that possibility seriously, because they're the only people we know of who went to caves with bats in them and then went straight to Wuhan.
So I don't even understand why is there any legitimate possibility that it was all naturally spread and not done by humans?
Yeah, because previous pandemics have come through natural spillovers.
Right,
SARS,
but you just made the most convincing case I've heard ever, that it was unlikely to have been natural since they live 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, and you have to, I mean, at one point the Chinese authorities came up with an explanation that it had come into the country on frozen meat from another country, presumably somewhere in Southeast Asia. Okay. And that theory was endorsed by the World Health Organization as more likely than the laboratory leak. Think about that for a second. Somebody's farming wildlife in Vietnam or somewhere. The wildlife gets infected. They chop it up, freeze it, and package it, and send it off to lots of cities in China. They don't get infected on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
None of the people who handle it get infected.
Right. No,
the recipients don't get infected anywhere else, only in one city.
That was an obvious lie. So I need you. There's so many things that need to be explicated. So again, I want to review this for both me and my listeners. The benign reason for this being made, if humans were involved, which seems to me to be quite likely the case, I would bet on it, let's put it that way, and I'm not a betting man, is to figure out how to create some cure or antidote or vaccine for some virus that might eventually be made by nature. That part struck me. Either I didn't understand you or it makes no sense to me. You're going to make a virus to know how to fight a virus?
Yeah. So let's imagine that they identified a virus that was capable of infecting human beings, and they found that there was that people had come into contact with it, and 2 or 3 people had caught it, and they said, "We've spotted this. This is a very dangerous virus. We've stopped it in the act." And the reason we stopped it in the act is because we've studied these viruses for years, and we know this one, and we know it's dangerous. They might get the Nobel Prize for that. They've saved millions of lives. It would be a tremendous achievement. Okay, so you can see where the ambition to do this comes from. But the possibility that instead of stopping it, they've started a pandemic is the one that we really need to take seriously and investigate. We're only asking to investigate.
No, I know what you're asking for. I am troubled by the very notion of making these things, Nobel Prize notwithstanding. Is there an example of a human-manipulated virus that an antidote to was developed in a lab and saved millions of lives?
No.
Okay.
There is.
If I were in a courtroom, I would go, I rest my case.
There is an interesting case. 1977, there was an outbreak of flu. It started either in eastern Russia or in northern China. And it was very puzzling because it seemed to be identical to a particular strain of flu that had been extinct since 1950. And it's so identical that it couldn't have just been hiding somewhere. And they eventually figured out that what's going on is that it was caused by a faulty vaccine. And that vaccine was based on this old strain of flu. They were doing vaccine trials in northern China. Now, that's an epidemic caused by a laboratory accident, if you like.
Okay, there you go.
It wasn't a very dangerous kind of flu.
Once again, the book is Viral. Matt Ridley and Alina Chan, back in a moment.
Streaming on Salem Now.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
The only way we separate the good ideas from the bad ideas is to be free to say whatever we want about them.
There's no free speech for fascists.
Your posts on Facebook, Twitter, and social media will be saved to shame you.
Creating an atmosphere of fear and repression, and it's gonna bust.
You cannot think differently.
It makes it difficult for you to learn from other people.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it, I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
All right, everybody. Unfortunately, the final segment with Matt Ridley. It's actually very disturbing, to be perfectly honest. Is it not true that Barack Obama had ordered the closing of this type of research?
Yes. Gain-of-function research was paused during the Obama administration in 2014 because of some slightly worrying experiments that were being done in influenza, which were done with the right intentions to try and find out how dangerous these viruses were, but were making the viruses more dangerous during the experiments. That was the argument. There was a big debate in the US about it, but the pause was a bit porous, shall we say. There were plenty of exemptions if you were working on animal viruses or if you'd already started the research or something. And of course, the research did continue in other countries. And by 2017, the National Institutes of Health had decided to end the pause and resume funding. And they hadn't banned the kind of research, they'd simply stopped funding it from the US government. So the gain of function debate was an important one, and it needs to happen again, because even if this virus didn't come from this kind of research, we now know that experiments were done which did cause SARS-like viruses to become more dangerous in the laboratory. And that ought to give us serious pause, given what we now know about how much damage a SARS-like...
Why are the Chinese so keen on doing this?
Well, the Chinese authorities were very interested in the SARS epidemic. It gave them a real fright. They started this research program to try and track down where this had come from and understand these SARS-like viruses. And it just grew and grew as a research program. It got more and more money. It got money from the United States, et cetera, et cetera. And they became more and more interested in tracing every SARS-like virus they could find. They took bats from the wild into the laboratory in Wuhan. This was something that Dr. Daszak denied for many months, but he's now confirmed that was probably the case. And so they were hot on the trail of any SARS-like virus to try and understand it. And I think they just got a little carried away with their own research. They forgot why they were doing it and what risks they were running as they were doing it.
Well, we've run out of time, but I have to tell you, first of all, I thank you for all your invaluable research, for writing this book. You have clearly no political end. You just want to find the truth.
Correct.
I know, and it's obvious. In my view, you found the truth, and it's a very scary one. In any event, the book, my dear listeners and viewers, is Viral, Matt Ridley and Alina Chan. Matt Ridley, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on the show.